Yo, what's going on, guys? It is your boy runnerman 15, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you guys how to play Burnout Revenge in 2024. Let's get into it. Now, before I start, you are going to need a PC. I'm not sure if the PCSX2 emulator supports any other platform, but I would recommend playing this on a PC. If you have like a gaming PC, that is ideal. The game isn't super intensive, but your average mobile phone isn't going to be able to run this at least smoothly, right? Especially with all the enhancements that we're going to be doing. Now, again, before I start, we're going to be using the emulator PCSX2. I'm actually going to be going through the entire setup process, what settings to change. So if you already know how to use PCSX2, if you already know how to use it and you just want the settings for the game, you can go ahead and skip to this timestamp right on the screen right here. Or you can use the chapters select. I think I'll just put chapters in the video and you can just choose it from there. That way you don't have to, listen to me blab on for like 5-10 minutes. Alrighty, so the first thing we're going to need is Burnout Revenge. If you don't have an official copy of the game, you're going to need to get a ROM of the game. Now, I can't show you how to get a game ROM because YouTube doesn't like that, and it's kind of piracy, even though this game isn't really being officially sold anymore, except for I think the Xbox store still sells this game for like $10 on the Microsoft store, but you can only play it on an Xbox, on a 360 or an Xbox like One or Series S and X. So if you want to play it on PC, you can't buy it from the Microsoft store and play it on PC. So your next best bet is finding a dump of the game somewhere or dumping the game yourself. Google is your friend. Game ROMs aren't hard to find. Just be very careful when navigating some of the pages. There's a lot of pop-ups. There could be viruses behind some of the pages, but usually the game ROM should be good. Once you get a copy of the game, you're going to want to navigate over to PCSX2. So you can just Google it, or you can go to the link in the description below and it'll take you to the official website, which is pcsx2.net. Now, you get two download tabs here. We get the stable release, which the stable release actually just got a huge major update. It finally brought the stable release up to the nightly release. But for this video, I'm going to be using the nightly release because it's always the most updated. So if you have Windows, click the download link for Windows. If you have Mac OS or Linux, there's other download links there as well. I have a Windows PC. We're just going to click download. This will download a 7-zip file, and this contains the entirety of PCSX2. Now, if you don't have 7-zip, 7-zip is an unarchiving tool used for 7-zip files and a bunch of other zip file extensions. In order to actually get 7-zip, just Google 7-zip, or once again, there's a link in the description below. You want to go to www.7-zip.org, and you're going to want to download the version for whatever computer that you're using. Right now, it's only supported on Windows platforms. I'm going to be using just this normal 64-bit. You just click download. It'll download an exe. You can open the exe, press yes on the little pop-up that comes up, and you can find an installation folder to install 7-zip. So after you've installed 7-zip, we can actually open this file and extract PCSX2. You want to double click on it. And if this doesn't appear as a 7-zip icon, just right click, go to open with, and go to 7-zip file manager, and it'll do the same thing. So now we can actually extract this to a folder. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to name it PCSX2 test. And you can either drag and drop all of this into the folder and it'll extract it, or you can click the extract button and you can find the folder that you created. So I'm just going to drag and drop it because it's easier, and it'll extract it just like that. And you can go ahead and close out of this. You can delete the 7-zip file now. So this is our main directory for PCSX2. Here's the main emulator file itself, PCSX2-qt.exe. You can create a shortcut of this, drag it to your desktop, or you can just open this file every time you want to launch PCSX2. So once you open the actual exe for the game, or for the emulator, so I keep saying game, it's an emulator, not a game. So for the emulator, you're going to be met with the setup wizard. This allows you to do an initial configuration of PCSX2. So the welcome screen it'll show you your language. You can choose what language you want. Mine's set to English because I speak English. And you can also choose your theme right here. And then there's this tab right here that says enable automatic updates. I would enable that if it's not already enabled. Click next. Now, this is where you're going to need a PS2 BIOS file. Now, it says at the top right here, for legal reasons, you must obtain a BIOS from an actual PS2 unit that you own. Now, you don't have to do this. Like I said, Google is your friend. So if you want a PS2 BIOS, I'm not telling you how to find it. I'm just saying there's a very large search engine that you can use to easily find what you need, right? So once you've found your PS2 BIOS files, or you just dumped it from an actual PS2 BIOS, or from an actual PS2, I should say, and they give you a little guide for dumping your BIOS right here. You want to first locate your BIOS directory, and I'm just going to go ahead and click Open BIOS folder, and I have my PS2 BIOS on my desktop. You want to click Browse, and you're just going to locate the folder that has your PS2 BIOSes. Now, my folder has a lot of different BIOS files in it. Yours will probably only have like one region. As you can see, mine has a Japan region, a Europe region, and a USA region. I'm just going to use the USA BIOS, and you're just going to want to select your BIOS and click Next. Now, this is where you can add a games directory. I have my own directory where I keep all my ROMs, PS2 games, and it'll tell you if you want to scan. I would click yes, because it'll just constantly scan whenever you open PCSX2. That way everything's updated. Say if you remove a game or you add a game, it'll already be there once you open PCSX2. So after you've added a game directory, you can click next. And then for controller setup, I have an Xbox One, or actually Xbox Series X, or a Series, I should say, controller. And if you want to use that in PCSX2, you're going to need to connect your controller to your PC. And in controller port 1, we can select what kind of controller we want it to be. So obviously we want it to be a DualShock controller. And then I'm going to click over here where it says automatic mapping. And I'm going to click X input. X input is for Xbox remotes. If you have a PlayStation, like PlayStation 4 or 5 remote, you're going to want to click, it should say like DualShock, right? Anyways, and we can always change these settings later. This isn't permanent. We can always go through the PCSX2 settings to change this and to change controller binds as well if you need to. So let's go ahead and click next, and it says setup complete, and we're going to click finish. Now, as you can see, I already have a bunch of games here because I already have a bunch of PS2 games, but most likely you won't see anything here, or if you already have Burnout Revenge, the Burnout Revenge ROM, it'll appear here in the list. Now, let's go ahead and I'll run you through the PCSX2 settings here. Now, generally, I don't really change anything in the main PCSX2 settings because we can change the settings specifically for each game. There are game configurations where you can change settings specifically for one game. That way we can have optimized settings for every game and not just one settings list for all the games, right? But in the main settings, there are some things that we can change here. So the behavior tab, you can change certain stuffs right here. So it'll say create save state backups. You can enable Discord rich presence, pause on start, save state on shutdown, blah, blah, blah. You can start it in full screen. You can also change your update channel here. So if you wanted to change back over to the stable, you can. And you can also check for updates here, which as you can see, no updates are currently available. I'm using the latest version. Now in the game list tab, this is where you can add more game directories if you have to. The BIOS section is where you can change your BIOS if you have multiple BIOSes like I do. If in the emulation tab is where you can change emulation settings. We're not going to touch anything here until we get into the actual game configuration. In the graphics tab, I'm also not going to touch anything here except for where it says adapter. You're going to want to select your graphics card. It'll be default. You can usually leave it at default, but just for as a safe measure, I like to specifically select my graphics card. And then in audio, we don't have to change anything here. In memory cards, this is where you can create your own memory card. So it says mine are missing because I deleted my documents folder for this game just for the video. But to create a new memory card, it'll automatically have two memory cards. One will be formatted, the other one will be unformatted. If you want to create a new memory card, come down here to where it says create. You can input a name. I'm just going to put Burnout Revenge Test. And you can select the size of your memory card. I'm just going to use 8 megabits or 8 megabytes. And it'll say memory card created. And then in order to actually select this memory card and load it into the emulator, you're going to want to go to either slot 1 or slot 2, press the eject, and then you're going to want to drag and drop it into whatever slot you ejected it, the other memory card from. So I ejected slot 1, just click, drag, and drop it into the slot. Now it'll say formatted? No. It'll say the memory card is not formatted. In order to format the memory card, we're actually going to have to go into a game and format it there. I know there's other ways to format the cards, but the easiest way is just to enter a game, select this memory card, like you want to save on that memory card, and it'll ask you to format the memory card. So we don't have to worry about that for right now. Network and HDD, these are if you want to enable like multiplayer. I know there's some games that support multiplayer. They have multiplayer working for some of the older PS2 games, but we're not going to mess with that in this video. This is where you can change any of the folders, any of the directory folders that you need to change, I should say. And then finally, the last tab is the Achievements tab. Now, what the Achievement tab is, PCSX2 uses a site known as retroachievements.org. Basically, this is a website that users can create their own trophy lists for retro games that don't have achievements or don't officially have achievements. So for Burnout Revenge, there actually is a trophy list for it. So if we search Burnout Revenge up here, if we go to the game page, as you can see, there are achievements for this game. So if you want to integrate retro achievements into PCSX2 and you want achievements for whatever game you're playing, not all games have achievements, obviously, but there are a large amount that do. So basically, you're going to need to create a profile, which you can just go up here. It'll say sign in, sign out on this tab. I'm already signed in, so it's not going to show that for me. But you just click sign up, put in your email, create a password, verify your email, and you're pretty much good to go. After you've created your retro achievements account, you can come into the achievements tab, see where it says account, click log in, and you can put in your info like this, and it'll say achievement tracking is not currently enabled. Your login will have no effect until after tracking is enabled. Do you want to enable tracking? Yes. And it'll ask you if you want to use hardcore mode. Hardcore mode doesn't allow you to use any save states or cheats. So if you want save states, cheats, fast forwarding, rewind and stuff, you can't enable hardcore mode. But if you want your achievements to actually mean something on retroachievements.org, you need to enable hardcore. So I generally enable hardcore mode for achievements. If the game has achievements, you can also change these achievement settings per game. I'm just going to enable this in general, and then that way if I play a game, it'll have achievements. You know, I'm not at risk at not getting the hardcore achievements, but if I specifically want to use cheats in a PS2 game, we can actually change that. I can disable achievements, or I can just disable hardcore mode. Now, encore mode, this is for developers, this is for creating trophy lists, so I wouldn't enable this. I'm going to enable test unofficial achievements, and then in the notifications tab, we can see you can mess with the notification settings for when you unlock achievements and whatnot. Other than that, there aren't any other settings to configure. If you go to tools, I think it's tools. No, if you go to the top of the PCSX2 window, go to settings, we can actually change our controls. So if you go to controller, it'll take us to this screen. For controller port 1, I'm going to make sure it's a DualShock controller, and we can click automatic mapping and either SDL input or X input, doesn't matter. And then you can actually go and change these configurations. So say I wanted L2 to be A, for instance, you know, you can do that. You can also click restore defaults. Yes. All right, so I actually had my webcam was actually blocking most of the frame, so I have to come and re-record the settings part. So in order to actually create a game configuration, a game specific configuration, you're going to want to find your game on your game list here, and you're going to want to right click on it and go to properties. After you click on properties, this little window will open. It'll create a game configuration file right here. As you can see, that is the name of the game configuration file. This is just the summary page. You can go to the interface page if you want to change anything in here, but we're going to go over to emulation. This is where we're actually going to change something. So if you go over to EE cycle rate allows you to increase internal frame rate in games, as you see in the bottom of the little window. So normally this will be set to 100. We can go ahead and bump it all the way up to 300%. We'll be able to get 60 FPS in game. Now, if you are having issues running the game, turning this down will allow the game to run a little bit faster. But if you have a semi-decent CPU, you can bump this all the way up to 300%. I can run it just fine. If we head over to the patches page, we can change patches, or we can enable patches for the game that enhance the game. So I have the widescreen patch enabled. That way the game runs in widescreen. I have 60 FPS menus and crashes and crash mode enabled. This will give us 60 FPS in the game menus, and this will give us 60 FPS in the crash mode mini game in the game. There are some other patches you can enable or disable. There's an ultra-wide patch, there's a conversion patch for speedometer units and whatnot, but these are the three that I have enabled. These are the three that I'd recommend enabling. Next, if we head to the cheats tab, this is a menu where we can enable cheats if you want. If you guys want me to make a separate video on how to use cheats inside PCSX2, I will go ahead and make a video on that, but for this video, I don't want this video to get super long, so I'm not going to cover this. In the game fixes tab, we don't really have to touch anything in here. If we go to the graphics tab, we can see our renderer at the top. It'll normally be use global setting automatic default. We're going to change this to Vulcan. Vulcan gives us the best compatibility and best performance. I haven't had any visual graphical glitches or anything like that using Vulcan. Game's running smoothly for me. So if the game doesn't run well or you're seeing a lot of glitchiness on your screen, you can change this to OpenGL, or you can change it to like DirectX 11 or 12, or you can use software rendering. Next, our adapter, I just have it set, to my graphics card. And then the rest of these settings we can go ahead and leave default. If we go to rendering, this is where you can upscale your game. I have my internal resolution set to 3x for 1080p. You can bump it up to 6x if you have a 4K monitor and bump up the textures to 4K, or you can go all the way up to 8K, but I wouldn't recommend that. The game probably is going to run super slow. So I'd recommend if you have a 1080p monitor, 3x, 1440p monitor, 4x, or a 4K monitor, 6x. Now, if your game is running slow, when you turn this up, turn this down to native. Because as you turn this up, obviously it's going to use more of your graphics card's resources. For texture filtering and trilinear filtering, I'm leaving these at default. For anisotropic filtering, I'm bumping this up to 16x. This will help smooth out all the edges in the game. If your game's running slow when you have this enabled, bump this down to off or to a lower value. Dithering is default, and for blending accuracy, I have it set to high. Now, like I said, if your game's running slow, you can turn this down. Blending accuracy basically just increases the accuracy of blended textures. That way, textures blend better. It'll give you, and each option, by the way, will give you a little description in the bottom of the window here anyways. So if you want to know what each option does, it'll give you a general description of it. Now, for the rest of this, we can go ahead and leave all of this default, all the texture replacement, all this crap. We can leave all this default. Audio, we can leave default. Memory cards is where you could change your memory cards. All this other stuff we can leave default. And yeah, other than that, there's not really any other settings we need to change for this game in order for it to run well. So as you can see, we do get some stutters when loading in. There'll be some stutters when it loads like leaderboard times if you have retro achievements enabled. But as you can see, I'm only using about 30% of my GPU. and about 30% of my CPU. So game doesn't really take a lot to run well, especially with the enhancements and stuff. So yeah, as you can see, the game runs good, works fine, running at 60 FPS, nice and smooth, nice and crisp, and it looks pretty good, a lot better than the original PS2 version. Other than that, there is one more thing I want to go over. When you open your game and you see at the top left, if you have retro achievements enabled, and you see in the top left, it'll say, like, if it doesn't say your game, how many achievements there are and stuff, it'll probably say retro achievements not supported for this game file or game, or it'll say like unable to load retro achievements. Pretty much, usually the cause of this is you have the wrong ROM file. Retro achievements uses a very specific ROM for each trophy list, so you have to have the correct region, correct version. If you go to retro achievements, navigate to the game that you're playing for, in this case, Burnout Revenge. Go to supported game files on the right. You click on it, it'll tell you all of the supported game files that you can use. So as you can see, Burnout Revenge, USA, you need the US region of the game in order to have achievements. Other than that, if you're still getting the issue, try a different game ROM. Look through the forum pages on retro achievements. Maybe there's something specific that you need to do for that certain game. But for Burnout Revenge, as long as you have the US region of the game, you should be able to have achievements and whatnot. Other than that, if there's anything I missed, let me know down in the comments below. Let me know if you guys are still having issues running the game, and let me know if you guys want to know how to use cheats in PCSX2. Other than that, this was how to play Burnout Revenge in 2024. I am runnerman15, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.